Hi, and welcome to the 2022-23 free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA, step-by-step instructions to renew your FAFSA application. This instructional video was designed to help a student who has already completed a FAFSA application in the past. So this may be a student that's already in college or stopped attending and wants to start back, but basically any student that has completed a FAFSA at any point in time, this is the instructions to help you renew your FAFSA. These slides were created by Champions for Learning with a mission to create life-changing learning experiences for every student with a vision for a community that is 100% engaged in support of student success. Champions for Learning is a partner in Future Ready Collier, which is a network of more than 60 organizations, businesses, schools, and community members working together to ensure that every child is ready for kindergarten and every young person enters adulthood with a vision and a plan to accomplish that vision. Future Ready Collier is the Collier partner supporting the 5-county Future Makers Coalition with a goal to transform Southwest Florida's workforce by increasing the number of college degrees, certificates, or other high-quality credentials from 27% to 60% by 2025. FAFSA completion is the #1 indicator of college going and provides access to a range of financial support to students. Champions for Learning partners with Collier County Public Schools and other partners to leverage resources to support students and their families to complete the FAFSA. We play a lead role in providing resources, training volunteers, and facilitating FAFSA completion events. These screenshots were prepared by Champions for Learning and are provided by the Federal Student Aid and Office of the U.S. Department of Education. They are based on a fictional student and family situation. They're intended to be used for training purposes only or to help guide you through completing your own FAFSA. Your answers will vary from the ones that we walk through. Now, the first step before we start our FAFSA is to make sure that both the student and the parent have an FSA ID. If you've completed the FAFSA within the last 6 years, you would have an FSA ID username and password already. If you don't remember what that FSA ID username or password is, you can go to fsaid.gov to hit forgot password or forgot username to be able to retrieve that. If you believe you may not have set one up or completed a FAFSA prior to 6 years ago, you can view a step-by-step tutorial on how to set up a FSA ID username and password by going to championsforlearning.org/resources. We have a step-by-step video to help you complete your FAFSA in about 5 minutes. Okay, before we get started on your FAFSA, you're going to want to make sure that you have the student's social security number or alien registration number and your 2020 federal tax return for both the parent and if the student filed those taxes as well. Also, if there's any untaxed income, you'll want that record along with your checking and savings account balances. And just as a reminder, you want to make sure that you enable your pop-ups before starting the FAFSA, as the IRS data retrieval tool will be used as a pop-up from within the FAFSA. Now that we're ready to start, you want to make sure that when you're going to the website that you type into the address bar FAFSA, FAFSA.gov. If you were to go out and try to Google FAFSA, the first result that's going to come up is actually going to take you to a .com address, which is not the actual government website. It may look the same, but you want to make sure you're at FAFSA.gov. And if you filled out the FAFSA before, when you get it to this page, you'll notice it looks a little bit different. There's been quite a few enhancements done to this year's FAFSA. So you'll see on the screen what the new FAFSA open page looks like. As the student, you'll want to select that first box that you're the student completing the FAFSA. You'll also notice that in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little owl named Aiden, and he's a virtual assistant. Should you have questions along the way or not understand what they're asking for, you can certainly use Aiden, the owl, and I'll also show you some additional ways to find resources as you complete the FAFSA. So let's select that you're the student, and once we continue there, it's going to ask you to log in using that FSA ID username and password. And once you provide that username and password and check log in, it will then pop up that you're about to access a US federal government website, that it's being used for educational purposes, and to calculate, to help get you aid to go to post-high school education. It's just reminding you though that you want to be truthful and honest. You can read through all of this and accept or decline. Okay, now because you've completed a FAFSA in the past, you'll see a couple options on this screen. So first you'll see the 2022-23 FAFSA. That's the one that just opened October 1st, 2021. That's the current year FAFSA that you'll be completing for aid that would begin in fall of 22. Since we have not started that form, it's going to give us the option to renew or start anew. Now, since you have completed a FAFSA before, you're going to get to select that Renew My Fafsa form. And what that's going to do is take us about halfway through the FAFSA using information we had submitted in previous years. It will give us the opportunity to change an answer if something like an address or a phone number has changed. So we're going to select Renew My Fafsa form. Okay, it's going to ask us to create a save key. So that's a short password, can be as little as 4 numbers. You'll want to write this down and keep it in a safe place. This is if you or your parent need to come back into this specific FAFSA form to make a correction. If you weren't able to finish completing it in one sitting, you'll need to use that save key. Perhaps you're away at college and your parents are going to enter the financial information on their own at a separate space. You'll have to share the save key with them so that they can log in and access. So that's why the save key is really important. Go ahead and hit continue. Okay, it's going to give you some step-by-step instructions. If you'd like to read those, you're welcome to. Otherwise, you can click continue. Now you'll notice at the top, we have 7 sections to the FAFSA. As we progress through those sections, those blue or white dots will turn to green check marks. The FAFSA does not allow you to jump ahead or go backwards until it's all been entered, and those green check marks appear. And for the first couple sections, as I mentioned, this information will be pre-filled for you. So on this screen, you just want to make sure that everything is listed correctly, and you'll hit continue. Here it's going to ask for your email and your telephone number. Make sure both of those are entered correctly. That email address is where you're going to get your confirmation, which includes your student aid report. So you want to make sure that email address is correct. Again, your permanent mailing address. Remember, permanent mailing address is not always our address if we're away at college. This may be a permanent mailing address that's a home or where our parents are. Okay, now it's going to ask if you've lived in Florida for at least 5 years, and it's going to ask if you're a citizen. Again, this information is most likely pre-filled, but keep in mind, your citizenship status could have changed since you last filled out a FAFSA. Also, if you'll notice at the end of every single question, there's a tiny little circle with a question mark in the center of it. Throughout the FAFSA, if you don't understand what they're asking for or need to know where to find that information, or maybe just a better definition, you can click that question mark and it will give you a better definition, a little bit more information to help you answer that question. Okay, now it's going to ask a little bit about your high school information and some of your college information. So that first question will be, what will your high school completion status be when you begin the 22-23 school year? So for most students, this would be a high school diploma. What college degree or certificate will you be working on when you begin the 22-23 school year? So keep in mind, again, this is next fall potentially. This is fall of 2022. What degree will you be working on? So you want to make sure if you're just in your first or second year that you're selecting that correct credential or correct degree that you're working on. Unless you already have a first bachelor's degree, which would be a 4-year or 120 credit degree, that you're answering the correct option. You'll see there's a lot of options there, but just make sure you're entering what this degree or certificate you'll be working on. If you haven't achieved any college credits or haven't been working on anything yet, it could be that you filled out another FAFSA and you're just getting back into going to school. So you may be working on an associate's degree, a technical degree or certificate, up to a first bachelor's degree. And then it's going to ask if you will have that first bachelor's degree before you begin the 22-23 school year. That's going to vary for every student. And then it will ask what your current or what your college grade level will be next year. So if you're a freshman this year and you're going full time, by this time next year, you would be a second year sophomore. Keep in mind, it's not just based on the year, it's based on if you're going full time. So what will your academic grade level be? Okay. Then it's going to ask if you're interested in being considered for a work study position. Keep in mind, this does not guarantee you a job. This just lets the financial aid office know that if you need to have additional support to calculate the cost of attendance, that you would be willing to consider working on campus to earn dollars to help pay that portion. Again, it does not guarantee you a job. And if you're unsure about it, you can select that you don't know. Okay, now it's going to ask if you're male or female. If you answer female, you will not see the bottom two questions. If you answer male, you will. One of the changes to this year's FAFSA is that it no longer requires a male to be registered for selective service to be eligible for federal student aid. So where it asks if you are registered for the selective service system, you can answer yes or no. Again, if you're not familiar with what the selective service system is, you can use that question mark for a definition. And then it asks, do you want us to register for your selective service? That's up to you as the student. And again, that will not impact your eligibility for federal student aid from this FAFSA going forward. Okay, now it's going to ask for your driver's license information. Most likely this is pre-filled if you entered that as well on your previous FAFSA. Just confirm that everything's correct and hit continue. And again, this section would also be pre-filled. Okay, now it's going to ask if you've ever received federal student aid before. If you're not sure if you have or not, again, use that question mark. It will show you the definition of student aid and what the different types of aid is. If you answer yes, you're going to have a subsequent question on this form. If you answer no, you will not see this question. But if you answer yes, it will ask if you have been convicted of the possession or sale of illegal drugs for an offense that occurred while you were receiving aid. So while you were in school receiving aid, were you convicted for possession or sale of illegal drugs? It's really important that you answer that question and understand what that question is accurately. Again, if you're not sure, use that question mark for a further definition before hitting continue. Okay, now your high school again should be pre-filled if that was selected on your previous FAFSA. That information has transferred forward. Just confirm that it's all correct. You may not have to select here. It should just look like this. If not, you may need to search for the city, state, and add the high school that you graduated from. Okay, now it's going to give you the opportunity to add in colleges. So if you are already attending college, you want to make sure that the school you're at is added to this list. Remember, you can add up to 10 colleges or universities or technical schools to this list. You do not have to be currently attending them. You don't have to even completed an application or been accepted. So it's okay if you think you're going to be transferring or going to a different school within the next year. Make sure you go ahead and add them to the FAFSA now. You'll search by state and city. And again, you can add up to 10 schools. And once you've selected all of the schools that you'd like to put on your list, you'll see a vertical list that is numbered. You want to make sure that the school that is in position 1, if you're going to school in Florida, is a Florida public state college, technical school, or university. This is what indicates to the state of Florida that you may be eligible for state aid. So if you're unsure, check and that school is public. You can do that by Googling. Keep in mind, schools with names like University of Miami or University of Tampa, those are not public universities. They do have the word university in their name, but those are private institutions. So like Florida Gulf Coast University, Florida State Southwestern State College, Lorenzo Walker Technical College, the 3 on this screen that you see, those are all examples of public institutions. Okay, once you make sure that you have a public institution in position 1, then you're going to select your housing plan for each one of those schools on your list. Keep in mind that even though you may be thinking about living off campus, your financial aid will not cover off-campus housing. So in order for financial aid to cover that, you need to make sure you're selecting on campus. This does not guarantee you housing on campus. You still have to go through the application and deposit process with an individual school. This is just telling the financial aid office that when they factor your financial aid and provide your financial aid award letter, to include that cost of dormitory fees and potentially even room and board onto that cost of attendance. Okay. Of course, in the same respect, if the school does not offer a dormitory as an option, like a technical college like Lorenzo Walker does not have a dormitory option, you will need to select off campus or with a parent, depending upon where you're going to live. And once you've done that for all of the schools on your list, you'll want to hit continue. Okay, now it's asking, this will transfer over, but maybe your status has changed. So as of today, as the student, what is your marital status? Okay, now it's again, as of today, do you have children that you support at least half time and you will continue to support in the next year? Yes or no? And do you have dependents other than your children or spouse who live with you and you will support now and again through the next year? Yes or no? Okay, you'll notice we're on section 3. It's asking those dependency questions to determine if we need to use parental information on the FAFSA. Now at this list, you're going to read through each one of these and see if they apply to you. If they do not, you can again hit none of the above and continue. Okay, it's going to ask if you are homeless or at risk, self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. Keep in mind the definition of homeless. You can read by clicking that question mark. You do not have to be living in a park to be considered homeless. It means that you may not have a permanent evening residence. So you may be couch surfing or moving from friend's house to friend's house. That may make you considered to be homeless and self-supporting. Okay, based on how you answer those questions, it will then tell you if you are dependent or independent. If you're dependent, it will require you to provide parental information to process your FAFSA. Keep in mind, in most cases, you're going to be considered a dependent student until you turn 24, are married, have a child you're supporting at least 51% of the time, are in the military or a veteran, or if you have already achieved your first bachelor's degree. There's a couple other situations based on maybe a living situation or that could fall into that based on how you answered the previous questions. But in general, you're going to remain dependent unless one of those other things occurs first. Okay, now it's going to go through and ask you which parent's information you should provide. This is giving you a little different breakdown than it's done in the past. So it gives you a little definition to help you determine which parent you should be using on the FAFSA. So in general, if your biological parents are married, then you would use both of your biological parents on the FAFSA. If your biological parents are divorced or separated, then you would use the parent that you live with 51% of the time or more. And if that parent is remarried, that step parent would be parent 2. So if your parents are separated and the parent you live with the most is not remarried, there would not be a parent 2, there would only be a parent 1. And once you've determined that, go ahead and hit continue. And it's going to ask, what is the marital status of your parents and the date that that occurred. Now, if you've used this parent before on your FAFSA, again, their information is going to be pre-filled here for you. Just make sure it's all still correct, especially that email address. And again, if parent 1 is married, then there will be a parent 2. If parent 1 is single, there will not be a parent 2. Okay. If either parent 1 or parent 2 is not a citizen or does not have a social security number, that's okay. You can enter all zeros for the social security number. Remember, your eligibility for aid is not impacted by the citizenship status of your parents. Okay. It just means they will not be able to sign electronically on the FAFSA and will have to print out a signature page, which we'll show you in just a few minutes. Okay, so once you've got parent 1 and parent 2's information, it's going to ask if they've lived in Florida for at least 5 years. Again, this information is most likely brought forward from previous FAFSA completions. Just make sure it is still accurate. Okay, now it's going to try to calculate your household size. So this has changed a little bit. In the first box, it's asking how many dependent children do your parents have? These are children that rely on your parents' support or for more than half of their support in the next year. So basically, these students can live, or these siblings can live with your parents, or they could be away at college, or they could potentially be living in another home or out of the country. But if your parents are supporting them at least 51% of the time and will continue to within the next year, you will enter them in that number in the box. So in this case, we said our student has 2 siblings that the parent is supporting at least 51% in the next year. Okay, then it's asking how many other dependents do your parents have? This would be dependents that are living in the same house as your parents and are currently receiving more than half of their support and will continue to within the next year. So an example of this would be if there are grandparents or other relatives perhaps that are living in the house with the parents that the parents are supporting now and will continue to support in the next year at least half time. If that doesn't apply, you can put a 0 and hit continue. Okay, now based on how we answered those previous 2 questions, it's calculated a household size. And now it's going to ask out of the number of dependents, so the student and the siblings that we answered in the first question, how many will be in college between July 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2023. This does not include your parents. So this would just be you, the student, and those siblings that we entered into the first box on the previous page. So the minimum number that would be in this would be 1, you, the student, hopefully going into college or technical school, but it could be you as well as any other brothers or sisters or step siblings that would be going. Okay, once you've entered that number, you'll want to hit continue. Okay, now you'll notice it's asking your parents' tax filing status. So using those 2020 tax returns, you're going to want to pull that form out. At the top left corner, it's going to tell you what type of form they filed. The center, it's going to have their address, social security number, and right under that address information is going to be a box that's going to tell you what type of status they used filing that return. So that's how we're going to answer these first 3 questions. So if you have 2020 taxes in front of you, then that first question would be that they've already completed them. And then you can look in the top left corner to see what type of income tax form they used. Again, that's typically a 1040, a 1040A, maybe a 1040EZ or N. And then right under that address, we're going to look for what type of form they filed. So it could be that they filed married filing jointly, single, head of household. It varies based on the family, so you'll want to find that information. And once we've answered those 3 questions, then the box in the center will tell us if we're eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool. Okay, in this case we are, but because it's a fictitious situation, we're not going to be able to link into the IRS's system. We do recommend, if it gives you this option, that you do proceed to the IRS retrieval tool. It's going to import your tax information right into the FAFSA. So it's going to make completing the FAFSA a little easier. It's going to reduce the number of errors, and you don't have to go through and try to look for answers. If you're not able to do it and you have to enter it manually, that's okay. You're still going to be able to answer every question having those taxes in front of you, so don't worry. So let's look at both situations. So first, if we're eligible to proceed to the IRS, we're going to click that blue button, and it's going to ask the parent to log in using their FSA ID, username, and password. So once the parent logs in, it's going to give you a little pop-up warning stating that you are now leaving the FAFSA site and going to the IRS data retrieval tool, and a box will appear, and at the top it will have the parent's name and social security number. And as you scroll down, you'll see a place to enter the address. You want to make sure that you are using the address and entering the address exactly how it appears on those physical taxes that you have in front of you. So if the address on the physical taxes says 123 Main Street, STRRET, when you are typing it in, you want to make sure that you type out the word street. Don't abbreviate it to ST. Also, if you live in an apartment, you're going to want to make sure that your apartment number is either listed in the street address or in the apartment box and enter it correctly. If it's all capital, make sure you use all capitals. So just take a moment, read through that, and make sure that you've entered everything exactly. It'll give you about 2 attempts to do that. And if it's not successful at matching to transfer it in, again, that's okay. You'll still be able to enter everything manually. And we'll walk through that manual example now. So if you were able to transfer from the IRS, you would not see an option to be able to answer these fields. The box would be grayed out and it would say transferred from the IRS. You would still just have to hit continue to move through the pages. But in this case, since we were not able to link to the IRS, we're going to manually enter those numbers. And if you'll notice right above the entry box, it says, this amount is found on IRS Form 1040, line 11. Every single question as we move through this will tell us exactly which line to be looking at on those taxes you have in front of you to help you get the correct answers. Okay, so once you've got that answer, hit continue. Same thing on this question, is asking for the income from parent 1 and parent 2, and it tells you how to get to that number. Okay, now it's going to ask if the parents filed a Schedule 1. If you're unfamiliar with what a Schedule 1 is, you can hit either that blue box or the blue line where it says learn about Schedule 1, or you can use the question mark indicator. Schedule 1 is really used to report unemployment compensation, educator expenses, IRA deductions, student loan interest deductions, or Alaska permanent fund dividends. So you would also have a Schedule 1 there with your taxes. It's is part of the tax filing process. So if you have one, you can mark yes, you can mark no if you don't. If you're unsure, you are welcome to mark don't know on that option before continuing. Okay, and it will continue to ask some additional questions from the taxes. Again, just use that little indicator telling you which line to be looking at. On these questions, these are pre-filled with zeros, but you'll want to read through each of these options and see if any of these apply to you. Some may be on your taxes, some may be other forms of income or benefits that you've received. We'll have a couple pages of these types of questions. You'll want to read through them. If they apply, enter a value. If they don't apply, you can leave that 0 there and continue to hit 0, or I'm sorry, continue to hit continue to proceed through the FAFSA. Okay, if at any point it asks if you would like to skip the remaining questions about your parents' assets, you'll want to select yes. This means that the FAFSA has enough information based on what we've already answered to make a financial determination around your need-based aid according to your parents' pieces of income. So we recommend you hit yes. And once you hit continue from that, you'll notice it looks like we're back to the IRS data retrieval tool. However, now we're in section 6, which is the student's financials. And at the top, it's asking for the student's tax filing status. So even though you're a student, you may have worked in 2020. If you filed taxes, you'll want to select if you filed taxes, what type of form you filed or that you've already completed. You may not have been required to file or you're not going to file. You can select that option as well. Okay, maybe you did work, but you weren't required to file. If you did work and you weren't required to file, obviously you wouldn't have a number or line to look at, but you would enter that information here. And again, just like the parents' taxes, it's going to ask if any of these circumstances apply to the student in the last year. Again, keep in mind, these are about the student, not the parent. So make sure you don't enter them twice, like what we did like when we were answering the questions about the parent. Okay, again, just reading through all of these to see if any apply and entering the correct amount. And then at some point, it may ask if the student wants to skip the remaining questions about their assets. Again, we recommend you answer that question with yes. That means they have enough information. So when you hit continue, you're now going to see a summary of all of the questions that you answered on the FAFSA. And there'll be a big, long vertical screen, and you can continue to scroll through that. Now, if you've noticed you've made an error at any question, You can use that previous button to go back to a previous section and correct the answer. It does give you an option to print this page. However, keep in mind all of this information is going to be emailed to you, so you don't necessarily need to print all of this out. You can hit continue, and now it's going to take us to the option to sign and submit our FAFSA. So now, because that student logged in using their FFSA ID, username, and password, they have the option of digitally signing their FAFSA. It'll ask them when they click that button to agree with the terms and conditions and hit continue. And then it will take us back to this screen where it will say a parent signature is needed. So in this case, remember, our parent did not have a Social Security number, so they're not going to be able to digitally sign. So they'll have to submit a signature page, which will get mailed in and matched up by FAFSA. They can agree with the terms, though, and put in an FFSA ID username and password if they have one. Remember, again, our parent didn't, but this is just what it would look like. Now, if the parent has that FFSA ID username and password, see that first option, they would be able to select sign electronically, and that way they could, both the student and the parent would have signed electronically and they could submit their FAFSA. In this case, remember, our parent did not have a Social Security number, so they'll need to print a signature page. Their FAFSA will not process until FAFSA receives that physical piece of paper mailed to them, and then they'll match up the physical piece of paper to the electronic signature from the student, and the FAFSA will process about 3 to 5 business days after they receive and process that signature form. So they'll print that physical form and go from there. Once they've done that, you'll notice, so it shows in this case, the student has signed. We see that green indicator box. The parent is unsigned. Now, we'll still let them submit the FAFSA, but keep in mind it will not be processed until they receive that signature form. Okay, once we hit submit, we have a congratulations confirmation page. A couple things that I'll point out on this page. In the top right-hand corner, you'll see a data release number, or a DRN. If for any reason you have to call FAFSA or maybe even your financial aid office, they may ask for this number as a form of identification to prove it's really you. So this will be emailed to you as well, but you're welcome to keep this in a safe place. Your DRN number will vary from year to year after you've submitted a FAFSA. Again, it'll give you the option to print this page. This is already in your email, so you don't need to necessarily print this page. The confirmation is already sent to you. But when you scroll down, you'll notice you'll have an estimated expected family contribution, or an EFC number. Again, this is the number that the schools and maybe scholarships use to determine if you qualify for need-based aid. That's not used for merit-based aid, just need-based, okay? And keep in mind, this is not an indicator or a bill of how much you will have to pay to go to college, okay? It'll also show you a direct loan estimate. If you've successfully completed the FAFSA, everyone there will have an opportunity for a direct loan. That does not mean that you have to take the loan or that you are already taking the loan. That just means that because you've completed it, you have that opportunity to, should you need that additional assistance. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us to complete your 2022-23 FAFSA. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or call me. My information is right there on the screen. For more information about Champions for Learning and the resources we provide, feel free to visit championsforlearning.org/resources. Thank you. Bye-bye.